Okay, guys, I'm calling it. President Trump has been briefed on UFOs, and I'm not talking about anecdotal evidence such as a pilot encountering a UFO, as amazing as that is. I'm talking about the full Monty, or at least an extremely substantial briefing and understanding of the UFO topic. There's 4 points of corroboration for this now, so I think it's worth talking about. It's time to talk about it. So get in here. This is Jack with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please like and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Yeah, so let's just go in order. We have from NBC talking about Haim Eshed, Brigadier General of Israel and co-founder of Israel's space program. A very respected gentleman, waited toward the end of his life to come out with this information back in 2020. A respected professor and retired General Eshed said that aliens were equally curious about humanity and were seeking to understand the fabric of the universe. Eshed said cooperation agreements had been signed between species, including an underground base in the depths of Mars, where there are American astronauts and alien representatives. There is an agreement between the U.S. government and the aliens. They signed a contract with us to do experiments here. That gets into President Eisenhower's likely or potential meeting with aliens, one or more races. Now, there's various versions of that story. I don't know which one is the real version, if any of them are the real version, but it's, in my mind, very probable that something like that did occur. However, I also think that Truman, before Eisenhower, might have had a hand in shaping the UFO control group, and it could even go further back than that. But getting back to Haim Eshed, there's an agreement between the U.S. government and the aliens. They signed a contract with us to do experiments here. Eshed added that President Donald Trump was aware of the ET's existence and had been on the verge of revealing information, but was asked not to in order to prevent mass hysteria. They have been waiting until today for humanity to develop and reach a stage where we will understand in general what space and spaceships are, referring to the Galactic Federation. Now, I've talked before about what I think that means, but I'm not going to go on a tangent here. But there you go. Haim Eshed saying that, yeah, there's a Galactic Federation and that Trump knew about it. He also said that multiple countries were also interacting with the Galactic Federation, but Trump was on the verge of revealing this. So, again, Haim Eshed, not a lightweight guy, Brigadier General, co-founder of Israel's space program, somebody potentially in a position to know stuff that waited until the end of his life to reveal it. Now, I think he's still alive, but he is an old man at this point. What other corroborating evidence do we have for this? Well, we have Ros Colart saying something very similar in this conference or this press event.
When I know, for example, Trump's been briefed, you know what's going on? He's scared. He's scared they're going to kill him if he reveals what he knows. That's what I've been told. You have a situation where your potential president is terrified of speaking about the UAP issue because he's scared they're going to knock him. I'm not kidding you. I'm not making this up.
Okay, well, there you go. Ross saying that indeed President Trump had been briefed and indeed was going to reveal this to the public, much as Haim Eshed says. Now, Haim says he was talked out of it to prevent mass panic. Ross says he was threatened, which is ironic when we'll get to the later part of the story. But to continue. So that's 2 points of corroboration for this idea that President Trump has been briefed on UFOs to such an extent that he was going to reveal it to the public. So then let's get into the new information, Project Preserve Destiny. I think this is an amazing story revealed by some Italian journalists at L'Espresso, and I think the story has legs and could potentially be very important. The dossier provides for 6 levels of secrecy. The tycoon would be intrigued by the possibility of using the UFO theme to show himself as the president who tells the truth to the Americans. And this is all like AI translated, so forgive me. There are not only tariffs in Donald Trump's new agenda. Behind the scenes in Washington, there is a much darker dossier, that of UFOs. And according to confidential sources, something very concrete is already moving. It's called Project Preserve Destiny, and it's much more than just a program to study so-called UAPs. Behind this name, evocative and disturbing, lies an institutional waltz that risks redrawing the balance between the Pentagon and the White House. According to rumors, the so-called special access programs, which until now formally depended on the Department of Defense, will no longer pass through the Pentagon. They will report directly to the Oval Office. And of course, we're talking about the UFO control group here, formerly having to report to the Pentagon, now under the purview of the White House. That is hugely significant. The idea of Project Preserve Destiny is that various presidents over the years have been briefed on some of this stuff, but it was under the control of the Pentagon until today. That is just wild. A decision that was not taken lightly, the article goes on. On the contrary, it is the result of weeks of highly confidential meetings, closed-door briefings, and tensions between the military leadership and some advisors closest to the Republican president. Because Project Preserve Destiny would not just be any dossier. It provides for 6 levels of secrecy, say the same sources, which would make any conspiracy thriller pale. They range from the public level, where they tell you fairy tales, as those who know the dossier sarcastically explain, to the so-called programs within programs, sections so compartmentalized that they remain inaccessible even to the incumbent president. And I wanted to get into the whole fairy tale idea because I've talked about this before, what I think of as internal disinformation. Jeremy Corbell has another word for it, and I believe that is what we're dealing with when we come to the idea that the Tic Tac, for example, could be Lockheed Martin technology. And I've gone over in multiple videos about why I don't think that's the case. But I do think that's internal disinformation. Or I think Jeremy Corbell refers to it as passage material. But yeah, I think that's the fairy tales idea. Okay, so behind the choice to move the center of gravity to the White House, there would be, according to the well-informed, the desire to directly control the flow of information. And perhaps, in perspective, also to decide what to make public and what not. A decision that in part also responds to the pressure of a public opinion that is increasingly attentive to the phenomenon. Recent congressional reports have raised more doubts than certainties, fueling the idea that something is being systematically hidden. But in the corridors of Washington, there are those who read this move in a more political key, a card to play in the next election campaign. Man, I hope we get to that point where UFO disclosure could be a real election issue. We're not there yet. I mean, they'll mention it a couple times, but it's not a big election issue. They're not asked about it during debates, but we could potentially be getting there. I read the statistics that show that 8% more Americans believe in UFOs than they did just a few years ago. That's a huge increase in just a short time. If we can continue moving the needle to where 50, 60, 70% of the population believe in this, then absolutely that is going to become an election issue. That's huge. That's why we need to keep reporting on this. That's why UFO hearings in Congress are so important. Even if we don't get UFO disclosure that way, we will galvanize the public to then at some point get UFO disclosure. Although I do have hope for the next hearing. I really do. If we're going to actually get the direct participants of these programs, UFO crash retrieval programs coming forward, testifying under oath, potentially even with evidence and stuff that can be corroborated, that's massive, guys. That's massive, but I'm trying not to get my hopes too high. But either way, Really cool stuff. But this article shows how the UFO control group may be moving from the Pentagon to the White House. And we have corroboration from Gary Nolan, no less, that this is indeed happening. So let's go to what Gary has been talking about, which is the ironic part. I said, there's some irony involved in Trump potentially being threatened to keep his silence because if Gary is right, then Trump is threatening Gary to keep silent.
Amnesty is required. I've said this publicly, so I'll say it again here. I was personally threatened because I knew of a conversation that happened somewhere. And I alluded to it in the most elliptical fashion on a public broadcast. Literally a couple of days later, I get a phone call from a friend saying, XYZ at the White House is really pissed at you, and you should not ever say anything like that again because Title 18 applies. I said, what does that mean? Lethal force is operable.
Now that's terrifying. Now I doubt Trump or whoever is managing the UFO topic for him would have taken Gary out, but it does show that the White House is taking a firm hand in silencing things about this topic, which the UFO control group has historically done. I guess it's no surprise that whoever is managing this is still doing that, potentially under the purview of the White House. That is what Gary is saying, seeming to corroborate the Project Preserve Destiny information that indeed this is now under the purview of the White House and President Trump, which seems to indicate to me that he has been fully briefed on the UFO topic. I don't know if he knows everything about it, but he certainly knows enough to want control of it and to get it out of the hands of the people who have historically controlled it. Now, that will be impressive and exciting if he does something with it, but suppressing information on it, as Gary is talking about, isn't enormously encouraging. So we'll see what happens. It's early days yet in the new presidency. So, fingers crossed that something does shake out. We'll see where things go. I'm not going to comment further on that. However, if Trump is indeed in control of the UFO control group or some aspect of it, I think this is there's many aspects to the UFO control group, but if some of it is reporting directly to Trump or whoever is managing this, it might be useful to know who that person is that is doing this for him. Because, I don't think he's doing this himself. He delegates. He has people that do things for him, as a president does. Well, President Biden, when he was handling this stuff, got his national security advisor to do it for him. That's Jake Sullivan, who led the White House's Interoffice UFO Agency. They didn't call it the UFO Agency. This was back in Balloon Gate when multiple objects were shot down. One of them was unambiguously a balloon. They told us there were 3 other objects that were also balloons. They didn't show us any pictures or videos of those things, and they told us they tried to retrieve them and could not. Did that actually happen in all of those cases? Ros Colart reported that at least one of those objects was anomalous. I think that was in Alaska, and that it was shot down under President Biden's orders. So was it him making that decision? Was it Jake Sullivan who ran this team during Balloon Gate and potentially afterwards? We don't know. We don't have any information about Balloon Gate. They have been mum on all of that. Was that a UFO flap and with one actual balloon, and then they tried to pin the whole flap on balloons because of that? Or did something else go on? We don't know, but we do know they lied to us, and they potentially shot down a UFO, according to Ros Colart, without telling the public the truth about it, which is no surprise. That's what presidents and the control group have been doing forever, is, dealing with this stuff behind closed doors, not telling the public about it. If Trump does anything else, that will be the exception. But there you go. President Biden got Jake Sullivan, his national security advisor, to handle this for him, according to this New York Post article and other information about this interagency team. So who is President Trump's national security advisor? Well, it's Marco Rubio, who, depending on you ask, is either really pro UFO transparency or co-opted and corrupted by the UFO control group, because he was very gung-ho on UFO transparency not all that long ago. And then he went radio silent. So, which way does the pendulum swing on Marco Rubio? Is he still pro UFO transparency? Or has he been co-opted and silenced by the UFO control group and the powers that be that have always controlled this issue? Maybe that has shifted. Maybe it's now under the White House purview, but I will believe there's really been a shift in how the powers that be operate when there is disclosure. If President Trump is going to do something about this that hasn't been done before, now's the time, guys. Now's the time. So will that happen? Will President Trump come out with UFO disclosure, or at least allow Congress to aid in UFO disclosure by bringing whistleblowers forward and, not threatening them, for example? I mean, that'd be a start. That'd be nice. So who knows how this is all going to shake out or where it's going to go. It could just stay the same the way it's always been, which would be interesting, especially if this is under the purview of the White House. If nothing changes, that will clearly demonstrate that the UFO control group is more powerful than the White House, because obviously that shift was done for a reason. The Italian article tries to make the point that this was done to, facilitate UFO disclosure to make a political gain for the president and his party, which would be interesting. Again, I have major doubts about that because I don't think we're there yet as a society. But you never know. Maybe that is what's going on, and maybe that is why the shift has taken place. This moving from the Pentagon to the White House, if indeed that has happened. And, I believe that it's possible that it has, based on Gary Nolan's experience. But yeah, that shift was done for a reason. The question is why that was done. Was it done to bring us UFO disclosure for whatever reason? Was it because Trump wanted to do something specifically involving the UFO control group? He wanted control of it or some aspect of it because he wanted to accomplish some end, which would be interesting. I certainly don't know how it's going to shake out, but if you do, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think about it all in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Hit the bell to be notified of future videos. You don't want to miss a thing. Join me on social media. There's Facebook and Twitter links below. Love to see you guys there. If you want to support Cosmic Road in a bigger way, consider grabbing a coffee mug or a t-shirt in the merch store below, or by becoming a channel member. Channel members are rock stars, and I really appreciate you guys' support. Thank you. Meanwhile, there's plenty of other videos on the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. This is Jack with Cosmic Road, signing out.